Good morning, everybody. Yes, it is morning. It's 20 to 8 and it is the 14th of January. I'm having my morning cuppa before I go to work. I've just been watching a video as I was getting ready and it's compelled me to say something. It was a video featuring Dave Chappelle, a well-known black comedian, and Candice Owens, a well-known black activist.
Candice Owens, that rotten. She's the worst. I can't think of a worse way to make money. She's the most articulate idiot I've ever seen in my life.
Let me tell you the story. The early 90s, Manchester music scene was vibrant, it was rocking. Multiple genres were being played, different scenes. It was a brilliant place to be at. At that time, I was playing wine bars, nightclubs. I was selling mixtapes through record shops. I'd even produced an EP at that point. I was working on pirate radio stations and RSL radio stations as well. So I was heavily involved in the scene at that time.
And she told George Floyd's rap record on the internet, oh, he was this, he did that, and he's a drug addict, and he's not a hero, and why does the black community make him a hero? Why do you choose him as a hero? Relax and take notes.
And it was more or less the underground scene, touching into elements of soul, touching into elements of other genres connected to R&B, but predominantly underground. With that, you get to see a lot more than what you would see in the average nightclub. Because it was underground, some parties, they'd class them as, in the old days they used to call them shebeens. When I was playing them gigs in the 90s, they were known as blueses. As far as I was concerned, you had blueses everywhere. You had blueses in Liverpool, Birmingham, up Yorkshire, London. We used to travel about to go to blueses, and we have played blueses in different parts of the country. So these were just illegal parties that were basically a house filled with people, tend to be after club hours. In the old days, there tend to be a kitchen that was set out where you could buy West Indian food, buy your cans of beer. As it started phasing out, they stopped doing that. You just went in, you know.
Because he felt that I was diminishing the death of George Floyd by bringing up his record. In fact, he thought that the streets, which he described as alive, were justified in their reactions.
The atmosphere in those illegal parties is off the chart. No club either that I've ever played in or a club I have ever attended has given me an atmosphere like the most heightened moment in a blues. You just can't recreate it because of its intimacy and because of the acoustics. Bearing in mind, within these parties, you have a rig, a PA system that can be anything up to 30k. 30k in a house. Ridiculous, but sounded awesome. So these parties, like I say, it was at the height of the early 90s. The early 90s, there was a lot of problems in Manchester, a lot of problems. Different various gangs, turf wars, tit for tat shootings, stabbings, beatings. It was dangerous for a black person or a white person, but has to be said, because most of this activity generated in the black community, it tends to be more dangerous for black people. So that's a point that Dave Chappelle should bear in mind. I'd play these blueses, and there was one occasion where a good friend of mine who had his own sound system, their sound system was called Broadway. The chap who owned it was called Penfold. Lovely guy. Very good friends with him. He done his thing with his sound system, we done ours. We tend to play in different parts of the city anyway. But either way, two terrific sounds. I was sat at home one evening, not doing anything, just minding my own business. My friend, Penfold, come to the house and he said, what are you doing tonight, Phil? I went, not a lot. I said, do you fancy coming to this party I've got arranged? You can come, play a few tunes, get some food, there's some drink there, I'll sort you out. Me being passionate about music, me seeing an opportunity to go and play some music, yeah, why not? Love it. Even though it's playing on another sound set, why not do it? My boys won't have a problem with that. They know I ain't doing nothing wrong by doing that. So do it. Did do it.
We didn't choose him, you did. They killed him, and that wasn't right, so he's the guy. I think Candice Owens tried to convince white America, don't worry about it, he's a criminal anyway. I don't give a what this nigga did.
It turned out to be a fantastic night. In many ways, I pretty much annihilated the DJ that was actually playing for Broadway unwittingly, and he showed his distaste on the night by taking a record off the turntable. People was requesting a rewind because I'd done a particular mix just after he got off, but the record that I used, or one of the records that I used, was one of his records because he'd just come off. So because they wanted a rewind, the place erupted. He's seen his ass, picked up his record and put it back in his bag. I had to kind of improvise just like that. It was a funny moment, but a weird moment to see someone react like that. But unwittingly, he must have felt that I'd really took the wind out of his sails, and I didn't intend to do that. It was just merely I wanted to create a wicked mix, and I knew I had the ability to do it, and I'd done it.
He did a stand-up, said some things that I cannot repeat for my audiences, said he wanted to assault me in my lady parts.
I don't care what this nigga did. I don't care if he personally kicked Candice Owens and her stinky... I don't know if it stinks, but I imagine it does.
So, after that night, the organisers of that Shebeen Blues illegal party contacted me. Now, these organisers just happened to be two of the most feared gang members in Gooch. I'm not going to say the names, but there was. The place that I played was right slap bang in the middle of Gooch Close. Most people in the 90s, the early 90s, you would not have seen Gooch Close because you wouldn't have been allowed to go to Gooch Close because it was a no-go zone. The night I'll never forget when I pulled up to that gig. It was a cul-de-sac. Most of the windows had steel grills on the houses. That meant that most of them houses were empty. Why were they empty? Remember, bear in mind, it's a no-go zone. Tit-for-tat shootings, there was stuff going on all over the place. So that's the environment, yeah? That's not the white man, is it? That's not colonialisation that's created that environment. And that's not me trying to dog what is me, a mixed race, ethnic, or black individual, however you want to call it. That's me just owning what is around me and not being afraid. And then once I've owned that, I can actually move forward with my life on a more balanced view, rather than a cockeyed view.
He was basically offering an excuse for the rioting and the looting that we're seeing. He's saying the streets are finally responding in the way that they need to respond. Well, let's just look at Black history to see if the streets responding and the streets being alive with rioting and looting in their own communities has ever served us.
So this gig in this no-go zone, known as Gooch Close in the early 90s, I got contacted by these two individuals. They were impressed with the way I played. They asked me if I wanted to play every week. Cash in hand, no questions asked. Come and do what you do. I thought about it. And I thought, well, why not? Penfold's my mate, it's a good set. And that night was rocking. And same again, my boys, I don't think would have a problem with it. And they didn't, in hindsight. The funny thing was, after a succession of gigs, probably about half a dozen gigs, the tone started to change with these two individuals. They turned from giving me freedom and expression to do what I want to literally coming up to me deck and try to tell me what record to play. Literally picking the needle up and putting it on different records. So it was at that point I felt a little bit that I was out of control here, and I wouldn't say I didn't feel safe because I had no reason to not feel safe, even though I'll never forget on the Thursday I was setting up with Penfold and a guy walked through with an Uzi strapped round his shoulder, and he was just shining it as he was walking through. So this is just normality, you know what I mean?
He thought that the streets, which he described as alive, were justified in their reactions.
This is the streets talking for themselves. They don't need me right now. And these say, why isn't David Chappelle saying anything? Because David Chappelle understands what the he is seeing. And these streets will speak for themselves whether I'm alive or dead. I trust you guys. Let's enjoy your riots. They're not really even riots. Have you noticed that?
When you're DJing at a gig and you're setting up in Gooch Close and you hear a pop outside, the chances are it won't be an exhaust backfiring. I can testify to that. Because on that said occasion that I was doing that party, that blues with a friend of mine, we heard a pop. We went outside and his Fiat Punto, the back windscreen was shattered, gone in, and there was a bullet embedded in his back seat. That's the streets, Mr. Chappelle. So it's not that I'm feeling intimidated on that level, but I felt if anyone's not allowed to let me have my freedom of expression, I don't want to do it. I'm not a jukebox. There's plenty of DJs that would quite happily play what you asked them to play all night and get paid for it. I don't work like that. You give me 2 hours, I'll give you 2 hours of music. If I can, I'll drop in the odd track that you may want, but you're not dictating how I play every goddamn track. They ain't coming. So when I got home, I thought about the situation and I felt that our little transaction had run its course. No one owed anyone any money and we'd all been paid up, so it was levelled. I decided to ring these guys up, just tell them, hey, you know what, thanks guys, but I feel that I've kind of played my last gig for you now, and thank you very much. And I'm sure Penfold will kind of take it up from here. What happened next, I will never forget. The decibels went up on their phone, screaming and shouting at me, saying all kinds of things. Bearing in mind, this is number 1 and number 2 leaders of the Gooch gang.
Black Americans, upset about race issues, burned down their own neighborhoods and rioted. And what was the conclusion of that? Well, the conclusion, of course, was that naturally, the once flourishing cities, the automobile industries that were flourishing in Detroit and Chicago, they picked up, they packed up, and they left.
The next thing you know, the shouting, if you don't come and play the gig Saturday, we're going to come and kidnap you. Gonna come and kidnap you, right? And I thought to myself, you know what? I kind of made the right decision, didn't I? Kind of made the right decision. And then I think of Candice Owens and Dave Chappelle. And I think of both arguments that they pose. And I think one of them is being disingenuous. One of them is not prepared to own the badness within their own demographic, to the point that that badness does play a part in a certain element of mindset within a certain population, within that certain demographic. It's not about blaming the whole black population.
So we're going to repeat all of that, and it's been endorsed by Dave Chappelle, because the streets are alive. Black America is alive with anger, even if that anger, as we're seeing today, is not exactly justified.
We know that, but you've got to own when I'm more likely to get kidnapped, to get harmed, to get shot by a black man than a white man. I've done many transactions with people, and there's many times I've turned around and I've refused to do things. And there's many times I've turned around and flatly said no. I've never, ever been threatened to be kidnapped. So I got out of that. Luckily, I had someone who I knew and respected that worked on my behalf to quash that. There was nothing to quash. I done fuck all wrong. But if that wouldn't have been quashed, then what would have happened is every nightclub, every wine bar that I attend to play a gig, I would have had to have watched my back. And the chances are, because I was so high profile within the black music scene, I wouldn't have been able to come out my house, because I would have been spotted the moment I walked in, because people knew who I was. So I was a target. So it makes me think, it's a bitter pill that some black people have got to get over. The malicious, vindictive element of some of the black population is more detrimental than you'll ever know to the black population than any white person that has done to me. To me. Not something happened 600 years ago, to me in my life. And that's what Candice Owens is saying. So it's whether people want to digest that, own it, and then become a more knowledgeable person and balanced person with that information. And then you can go back to start having relationships with both black and white without carrying that baggage. So what am I going around calling white supremacy everywhere for? Red pill Phil, love you all, better get to work. Even the pissinators.